Good evening. Man, it's been a long time, guys. I'll tell you, it's funny. You know, when you love something and you're away from it, and then you come back to it, it's like not seeing a friend for a really long time. You kind of get nervous. Oh, am I still going to like this person? Is this still going to be fun? Well, you know what? After taking a month off, I can honestly tell you this has been something I've been looking forward to for about a month. So, Chaps Fantasy Chat brought to you on the Lenny Muddle Fantasy Sports Network. I have in the chat room. I got Ed Brondike. Welcome, Ed. Nuck and Futz, what's up? I got Royals Boom, and it looks like the Legends with us. So let's jump right into it because we got a lot of talk about, and you know the hour always seems to go really quickly. So what are we gonna do tonight? First off, we're in week 7. Man, it goes by fast, right? So I think it's a good time to do a mid-year progress report. See what we got. You guys know I'm a stats guy. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the stats, okay? Normally I like to focus this show on, matchups, but I'm not going to do that tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk about setting your team up for the second half of the season, making a run towards the playoffs, and understanding what the data's telling us, okay? So, what have we learned through 6 weeks of football? Well, we've learned a whole lot, right? The biggest thing, I take away 5 things from what we've learned in the first month and a half of football. And there may be more. We'll add to these as we go, the second half of the year. But here's what I feel is pretty proven through what we've seen on the first half of the year. 1, Philadelphia's pass defense stinks. They're not good. You can attack them. When you see Philadelphia's pass defense coming up, you want to play that team's receivers. Okay? We'll talk about that more later. 2, Atlanta's pass defense stinks. Same deal. When you see the Falcons coming up, you want to queue up your receivers against the Atlanta Falcons. 3, the Bengals stink. Right? When you're playing the Bengals, you want to target them. We can talk about Miami. We can talk about the Redskins. Those are the guys I'm talking about as far as fantasy purposes go that we really want to look at. Okay? And I'll give you an example of why in a minute. The 2 last points I want to tell you guys, though, and I think it's important to note, if you're in a fantasy league, these teams are still widely available. Yes, teams. If you're looking for a defense, if you're streaming a defense, San Francisco is an elite defense. People don't know about the 49ers defense yet, but they're elite. And you could probably go pick them up. I know that sounds minor, but little things like that go a long way when you're talking about not even always points at the end of the game, right? If you can get an edge by picking up a defense that no one's really paying attention to, why not do it? Right? Here's another one. The Steelers' defense is elite. Okay? These are things that people don't necessarily understand. I'll elaborate. First off, can you hear me? I always say this, but I do hate talking to myself on purpose. So let me know. Let me know you're out there, if you would, please. Here's why Pittsburgh and San Francisco's defenses are underrated and should be taken into account. Pittsburgh, Buffalo's a great defense, George. I absolutely agree. These are guys. I think I picked up the Steelers defense at the draft, And and honestly, they're like ranked 225th. They weren't even getting drafted. You could take them in the last round. So San Francisco's the same way. Nobody gave them any credit going into the year. And it's one of those things that, again, if it can gain you an extra 10 points, why not take care of it, right? What am I talking about? So let's look at defensive stats that count real quick. Okay, real quick, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but it is important. It is important. Team leader. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. Defensive team leaders in sacks. New England is first. This is going to sound like it's a little bit repetitive, but I think it's drilling home a point. New England's first with 25 sacks. Of course, I got them mixed up. New England's first with 25 sacks. Bear with me, guys. One moment. Well, screw it. Let's do this. How about INTs? INTs. New England's first with INTs, 14 interceptions. New England has 5 more interceptions than Carolina at 9, and Pittsburgh has 8. Okay? So you do the math. If you're in a league, San Francisco, by the way, is 7th. Okay? Excuse me. 7 interceptions, they're 4th. Pardon me. Getting ahead of myself. I get excited. Excuse me. So, New England, Carolina, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, right? Pittsburgh has 8 interceptions. San Francisco has 7. Let's move to, because I got to misorder. I got to make sure I'm looking at the right category. How about interceptions? How about sacks? Let's talk about sacks. Because I thought that's what we were talking about. Okay. 25 sacks out of New England. That can't be right. Sorry, guys. Bear with me. Hey, if it were all perfect, if it were all perfect, we wouldn't have to pivot. At this point, we're going to pivot. I will make the point of this argument, though, before I move on. You're talking about points, and with San Francisco, Pittsburgh, 8 interceptions is 16 points. 20 sacks is 40 points. That's a lot of value on these teams that might be missing, okay? So let's get back on track. Let's talk about these other teams where we can capitalize on, okay? First one I talked about was the Eagles. The Eagles' pass defense is terrible. Oh, I know, George. That was so infuriating. I've played, anytime that one of those defenses has blown up, I've played against them. I was playing against the Eagles when they scored 35 points against me. It was absolutely awful. Let's talk about their secondary, though, okay? This is what the Eagles have given up this year. 333 yards, 4 TDs and an interception against Minnesota. 422 yards, 2 TDs and an interception versus Green Bay. 321 yards, 3 TDs and 3 interceptions versus Matt Ryan. Here's the one that gets me. Case Keenum. 380 yards, 3 TDs, 0 interceptions. The Deadskins threw for 380 yards on him. Okay? Now, I'll give them this. The rush defense is stout, right? The season high that Philadelphia's given up rushing is 122 yards to Minnesota. Aside from that, they've not given up 100 yards. So, when you're playing the Eagles, you want to target your wide receivers. Now, Amari Cooper's out this week. If you're playing DFS, you want to go with Michael Gallup. You want to go with, I'll say it, Devin Smith. These guys are cheap darts you can use, okay? I'll just leave it at that. I really do think the Eagles are a good team, but I think teams will expose that secondary. All right? I think Gallup gets 2 scores this weekend, and I think Devin Smith scores this weekend. Cheers, guys. I've missed you guys. You like Lazard, huh? I watched him at Iowa State. He's a pretty good receiver there. I don't know much about him in the NFL, but we'll see. We'll see. I mean, he's talented. Let's talk about the Falcons. The Falcons' pass defense. Let's talk about what they've given up this year. And this is what I'm talking about, okay? Targeting weaknesses. 380 yards, 3 TDs, 0 INTs versus Case Keenum. Again. 231 yards. This is the one game where they had a good game. The Falcons' pass defense. 231 yards, a touchdown, and 2 INTs versus Carson Wentz. But then listen to these. 310 yards, 2 TDs, and 0 interceptions versus Jacoby Brissett. Listen to these names. 227 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions against Marcus Mariota, who just got benched. Deshaun Watson hung 426 yards and 5 touchdowns on him. And Kyler Murray passed for 340 yards and 3 touchdowns. Guys, aside from week 2, the Falcons have not picked off one player this year, or one passer this year. That's significant. That's significant. Now let's flip the coin. Let's talk about how bad the Rams are. Okay? Jared Goff has struggled this year. But let's not put all the blame on Goff. Let's talk about Brandon Cooks. Let's talk about the fact he's had 100-yard game. He's got 1 touchdown. Robert Woods. Wait, can I stop? A lot of this, I think I'm funny, so I'm gonna entertain myself here for a second. A lot of these people, I listen to a lot of different podcasters and radio announcers and all that stuff. You have to when you do this, right? Howard Bender, I'm listening to him on the way home, and he hits it right on the head. Fucking stop. Stop with the stupid names. Don't talk to me about Danny Dimes. Don't talk to me about Bobby Trees. I hate that fucking shit. I'm sorry. That's the last I'm going to cuss, but it is absolutely ridiculous. Let's address these people by their proper names. Now, if you want to call DeAndre Hopkins D-Hop, I get it. It makes sense. But none of the dumb. Danny Dimes is stupid. That's a stupid friggin' nickname. Back on point. Sorry, I saw Robert Woods. I had to say something. Thank you, Howard Bender, for bringing that up, by the way. That's on him. But I second that vote. So, let's talk about the Rams. Let's talk about Brandon Cooks in his 100-yard game. He's got 1 touchdown. Robert Woods, 1 100-yard game. 0 touchdowns on the year. How about Cooper Kupp? He's been Jared Goff's savior. Scoring in 3 of his 6 games and going over 100 in 4 of his 6. He has been the grease that wheels the engine, right? Whatever that saying is. I hate that. I hate that. It's so stupid. Sorry to George. Listen, this is another good point to talk about, right? I'm not talking to myself. If you're just listening to me, please go to LennyMelnickFantasySports.com. Please go and log in. There's an interactive chat room there where you can go and you ask questions. So no, I'm done, Kevin. I'm done. But please go. We're having fun. This is what this is all about, right? It's for you to ask questions and kind of let's talk together about these things because we do all spend a lot of time and it is a hobby, but we all want to win. That's what this is all about, right? So let's talk about this. I look for Jared Goff to break out this weekend because of who he's facing. I look for Robert Woods to have a big game. I look for Brandon Cooks to have a big game. And I look for Cooper Kupp to have a big game. I don't think they all go over 100 yards, but I'll bet you 2 of those guys do. And I'll bet you 2 of them score. This is a big game. I almost said St. Louis. For the LA Rams receivers, right? So there's another guy that I told you we could kind of target, right? Let's talk about this last target, and then we'll go into some rankings. But I think it's important because there is a perception about the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you just look at it at face value, you might not get the whole story. I think it's important to understand what's going on in Cincinnati. And what I mean by that is it's a total and complete rebuild from the ground up. They have nothing there. So I think Zach Taylor is a good coach. And I really do believe that they're going in the right direction if they give him a chance. But when you look at what Cincinnati's done, you might think you could just pick on them regardless. But let me read off a list of what quarterbacks have done. And then we'll talk about how much they've rushed as a team against them, okay? I guess that's the smoothest way I can say that. So, week 1, Russell Wilson, 196 yards, 196 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Not bad, not great. 196 yards, nothing to write home about. 64 rushing yards as a team and 1 TD. Week 2, San Fran, Jimmy Garoppolo has 297 yards, 3 TDs, and 1 INT. Not bad. Pretty good game. We'll give it to him. 259 rushing yards, 2 TDs as a team, San Francisco had. Not good. How about Josh Allen? Week 3, 243 yards, 1-1. Decent. 175 rushing yards and a touchdown. Mason Rudolph, 229, 2 touchdowns and interception. 66 rushing yards and a TD from the Steelers. Here's where it gets bad, guys. Here's where it gets bad. Kyler Murray, 253 yards, 0-0. 0 touchdowns. 266 rushing yards and 2 TDs. What do these guys have in common? Lamar Jackson, 236 yards, 0-0. 269 rushing yards the Cincinnati Bengals allowed and 2 TDs. Now, here's the question. Aside from San Francisco, the teams that have gashed the Bengals, and they are still the Bengals, George, sorry, have had mobile quarterbacks, with the exception of San Francisco. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. I think it might be. Because I think Cincinnati's rush defense is going to hurt them all year long. So let's do the average. We have 6 data points this year for the Cincinnati Bengals. 6 opponents. Average rushing. 1,099 yards rushing total. Comes out to 183.6 per game. Rushing. They're allowing 183 yards a game rushing. Passing yards, 1,454 or 242 yards a game passing. I think it's clear, right? Now, one thing I'll tell you to watch. Watch these next couple weeks, because if it is just these rushing quarterbacks, it might be something you could capitalize on the other way. Okay? So if they shut Gardner Minshew down, you might want to look in the opposite direction next week. So, let's pivot, okay? We've kind of talked about some guys, some areas where we can target. We've kind of talked about some teams where we know things. And that's really what this is all about, is understanding where we can capitalize. So I use this as an opportunity to create good trades. If you know this information, okay, take these stats and just double them. Because that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about going into we're talking about going into the fantasy playoffs 6 more games into the year, right? Week 12 is your fantasy playoffs. It's crunch time. Why the hell wouldn't you want to know your stats? So let's talk about it. Let's talk about some things that maybe you might not have thought about. Let's start with the quarterbacks, okay? Because that's, the beginning. Let's talk about touchdowns. Number 1, Matt Ryan, 15 touchdowns. Tied for second, Russell Wilson and Patrick Mahomes have 14. The next 3 have 12. Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz, and Jameis Winston. Okay? Right off the bat, that kind of surprises you, right? Tied for 4th. How about at 11? You got Dak Prescott and Lamar Jackson at 11 passing touchdowns for Lamar Jackson. Tied for 7th. Does that surprise you? Tom Brady and Jacoby Brissett at 9th. And then at 11th, with 9 touchdowns, you have Kirk Cousins, Phillip Rivers, Case Keenum, Gardner Minshew, and Matt Stafford. Now, we're just talking about touchdowns, right? I think it's kind of foolish if you don't bring in interceptions. And I'm not going to belabor the point and go through all these guys, but I do think it's important to notice. Yes, Matt Ryan has 15 touchdowns. He's also got 7 picks. The real impressive ones, Russell Wilson and Pat Mahomes, are toting a 14-0 out of Wilson and a 14-1 out of Mahomes. That's a pretty good ratio, right? I talked about Winston, 12 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Kind of defeats the purpose a bit, right? But the potential's there. How about Lamar Jackson? 11 TDs, 5 interceptions. Phil Rivers has 6 interceptions with his 9 touchdowns. It's all across the gamut. But that rate, the sweet spot's 2-1, right? So even if you're thinking about it, 2-1, Matt Ryan at 15-7, you're all right with. But you don't want to be in 15-12. You don't want to be at 12-10 like Winston is. So it's important to keep that in mind. Because, at first sight, Winston's 12 touchdowns looks pretty impressive. But you throw in those 10 picks, and it takes some of the luster off of it, right? Let's talk about completion percentage. Because I think that's important. It says a lot about what can go a couple of different ways. Leader in completion percentage out of quarterbacks. This surprises you at first. Derek Carr. 73.3% completion percentage out of Derek Carr so far this year. Right? Would you have thought that initially, Ed? Knuck and Futz? I sure didn't. It says it's a couple of things. First off, it screams to me, John Gruden's a hell of a coach. Because Derek Carr isn't a very good quarterback. He has some talent. He kind of has the Jay Cutler attitude, in my opinion, right? But damn it, Gruden's getting it done with him. And you know, I tell you, my good buddy Arnie, talking with him preseason, he tells me the Raiders are going to be pretty good. This is when all the Antonio Brown crap's going on. Well, you know, we had a good laugh. Actually, it was just me laughing, but we had a good laugh. And then a couple weeks ago, the SOB calls me back when they beat Indianapolis. Hey, remember I told you, Raiders going to be pretty good. And we laughed. Well, I just laughed. I think Gruden's getting the most out of Carr. And you might be able to use him in the second half of the season. If you're in a pickle, right? But let's talk about relevance. Because there's a lot in this chart here. The completion percentage leaders. Okay? Russell Wilson is second, 72.5%. Matt Ryan is third, 72.1%. Jimmy Garoppolo, 69.9% completion percentage. Back to San Francisco, right? Deshaun Watson, 69.7%. Here's one. What if I told you Kirk Cousins was the 6th rated quarterback with completion percentage at 69.7%? Excuse me, tied for 5th with Deshaun Watson. What if I told you that? Would you be surprised? I sure was. I won't belabor it because there's a lot of these to go through, but Dak Prescott, Teddy Bridgewater at 69.4%, Mason Rudolph, 67%. You know, a lot of this you can read two ways, right? San Francisco is for real. You know, you look at guys like Bridgewater and Rudolph, their percentages are higher because they're not throwing the ball down the field. And you could probably say that about Carr, too, in all honesty. But some of these other guys, I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, Deshaun Watson throws the deep ball. The fact that he's at 69.7% is impressive, okay? Then this list gets crazy. Phil Rivers, Joe Flacco, Kyle Allen, Case Keenum. It's nuts. But I did want to bring up Carr. And I did want to talk about some of these other guys. Kirk Cousins, I think, was... I looked for a big rebound in the second half out of Kirk Cousins, okay? Let's talk about yards real quick, and then let's move to rushing. Again, yards are important because they're stats, right? They're real and they're physical. And again, if you take the first 6 weeks and you double it, what are we looking at? Well, you're looking at a 2,104 yards out of Pat Mahomes. Matt Ryan has 2,011. Those are the only two guys over 2,000 so far. So the only two guys really on 4,000-yard pace for regular season fantasy purposes anyway. I know that's a little different from what you'll see in the stat books. Dak Prescott's third, 1,883. Phil Rivers, 1,785. Jameis Winston, 1,771 again. It's interesting. He keeps popping up on these, right? Probably get Jameis Winston as a pitch in on a bigger deal, is all I'm saying. And that's what we're going to start talking about as we start going through these rushing and receiving leaders. We're gonna tie this into how you can capitalize on this. That's what I want you guys to understand, okay? Because you could take these little nuggets that you find in these stat sheets and you could turn it into other things. You could turn it into better things. You can make your team better by just doing this practice. I didn't go very far with that. I want to talk about rushers because this is important to understand. Perception and reality are very different. Let's talk about yards per game because I think that's a great stat to start with. Yards per game, of course, you got 2 running backs over 100 yards per game. McCaffrey and Chubb. Nick Chubb at 101.2 yards per game probably surprised you. I know it did me. How about Leonard Fournette third at 97.3? And then you start talking about Dalvin Cook, Marlon Mack in the 90s. How about the 6th best running back, yards per game? Again, back to Arnie, Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs at 86 yards a game has not fumbled the ball once this year. Chris Carson, 84. Can't say that about him. Zeke Elliott, 81. Saquon Barkley, 79 yards a game. Rushing. This is rushing, okay? To clarify. But I think it's important. Fournette is having a great year. But you look at these names on this list, okay? I want to keep going. I'm not going to give you the stats, but so after Saquon, how about Lamar Jackson? I do want to talk about this. Lamar Jackson has the 10th best running yards per game of anyone in the league. He's averaging 76.7 yards per game. Rushing. If that's not an advantage, I don't know what is. Okay? I just wanted to pause and shed light on that. It's a quarterback who's averaging 76 yards a game rushing. That's 7.6 yards a game he's giving you just by rushing. Before he throws the ball one time. That's a weapon. That's a weapon. Breida, Hyde. Carlos Hyde, 71 yards a game. Ingram, Henry, Gore, 66 yards per game. Lindsey, Kamara, Aaron Jones, Sony Michel, Kerryon Johnson, Tevin Coleman, Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell, 22nd and 23rd yards per game. Okay? It's important to understand this, right? Perception. People have this great perception about Todd Gurley and about Le'Veon Bell. Well, why the hell, according to this, why wouldn't you want Josh Jacobs more? It's the name. Well, guess what? Fantasy football ain't about name. It's about putting the best stats up. Doing this is going to give you the best stats. Let's talk about touchdowns. Rushing touchdowns. This will be quick. Aaron Jones, 8. Aaron Jones has 8 rushing touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey, 7. Mark Ingram, 7. Nick Chubb, 6. Dalvin Cook, 6. Zeke Elliott, 5. Todd Gurley, 5. Deshaun Watson, 5. That's 30 points out of Deshaun Watson. 5 rushing touchdowns out of a quarterback is a weapon. Right? That's what I'm talking about. These are the fine-tooth comb that you're picking out of this. And that didn't make any damn sense, but you know what I mean. Right? So, when you can find out that Philip Lindsay has 4 touchdowns, Ed, Jordan Howard has 4 touchdowns. Jeff Wilson has 4 touchdowns. Jeff Wilson sitting out there on your waiver wire. I'm not saying to go pick him up, but I'm saying when you look at this, it means something when you find this stuff out. If you see Jeff Wilson starting to get some playing time again, pick him up. He's going to get the ball at the goal line. Let's talk about rushing yards. This is where it gets fun, right? Because again, we can talk points here, right? Christian McCaffrey, 618 yards. That's 61 points. Double it. He's giving you 1,200 yards. That's 120 points. Rushing. So you could start to put physical facts on these things. They're real, right? Nick Chubb, 607 yards. Leonard Fournette, 584. Here's the difference. Rushing touchdowns. McCaffrey, 7. Chubb, 6. Fournette, 1. That's the difference. You know what I'm saying? That's the difference. Dalvin Cook, 583. Chris Carson, 504. Zeke Elliott, 491. Marlon Mack, 470. 2 rushing touchdowns. Here we go again. Lamar Jackson, 460 yards rushing. 46 extra points he's giving you with his legs before he throws a pass. Josh Jacobs, 430. Carlos Hyde, Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry, Phillip Lindsay. Of note, Mark Ingram, yes, 424 yards is a little bit of a disappointment. 7 rushing touchdowns. Right? How about Chris Carson? Only 2 rushing touchdowns and 3 fumbles. Kind of takes some of the luster off the 504 yards, the 50 points he's given you, right? This is fun to look at, right? This is why I love doing it. I do this with baseball all the time. And I think it's important to do. You can't do it every week with football, but I think it's important to do it at segues, right? So let's talk about catch percentage. This is kind of one of those, yeah, it's a little bit receivers, but it's also, there's a lot of running backs and tight ends here. But I think it says a lot because it's the higher your catch percentage, the more dependable you are to your offense, right? James Conner, 96.3% catch rate. Austin Eckler, 93.3, second. Mark Ingram, 91.7. That one was surprising. Of course, he's only been targeted 12 times, but he's caught 11 of them. The other 2 guys have been much more. 26 of 27 for James Conner. And 42 of 45 for Austin Eckler. I'll say that again. Austin Eckler has caught Ed, I know you just traded for him. Austin Eckler has caught 42 of his 45 balls. 42 receptions times 2, 84 catches out of a running back. I mean, you gotta love that, right? So, how about, Mark Ingram, 3, 91.7. Chris Carson, 4, 90.5. Dalvin Cook, 88.5. Darren Waller comes at number 6 with an 88.1 catch percent rate. He's got 37 of the 42 targets. So there you go, Ed. You got the top 2 catch percentage guys. You're in good shape. You're welcome. Darren Waller at 88.1%. And you think about what Oakland's doing. He's a big part of that offense. Friggin' LaShawn McCoy. Sorry. Number 7, 86.7%. Jalen Samuels tied, 86.7%. Devonta Freeman, 86.2%. Naheem Hines, Cameron Brate, Hunter Henry, someone to watch out for. How about Tyler Lockett? The 14th best catch rate. I kind of prolonged this on purpose. Sorry. The 14th best catch rate is the first wide receiver that shows up on this list. If you'll go back and you'll remember, I talked about Tyler Lockett in the preseason. I'm not really good at patting myself on the back. It's something I'm trying to do, to work at in this industry. In this industry. I told you MFers about Tyler Lockett in the preseason. Okay? In the preseason, it was Tyler Lockett, it was Calvin Ridley, and it was Mike Williams. I'll take credit on two of those guys. Mike Williams has let us down, right? Tyler Lockett has caught 35 of his 41 balls. 85.4%. Will Dissly, Le'Veon Bell, Alvin Kamara. What do all these guys have in common? None of them are receivers, right? Austin Hooper, George Kittle, Matt Breida. Here you go, Ed. T.Y. Hilton, number 21, is your second wide receiver on this list. 21 down. 82.8%. He's caught 24 of his 29 passes. I won't belabor this point too much longer, but I do want to go down through here. So I went down to 34. The other receivers on this list, Mohamed Sanu. I talked about Calvin Ridley because of his catch percentage last year. Mohamed Sanu has replaced him on this list. He's catching 80% of the balls thrown at him, 32 of 40. Michael Thomas is 30th on this list. Talked about him at the beginning of the year because he had a high catch rate, 79.1%. And Kenny Stills is 33 at 78.6%. Now, some of that makes sense, right? Because the running backs aren't going out as far, the tight ends aren't going out as far. But you look at these receivers, with the exception of Sanu, these are all downfield guys, right? I think that's important to know. Let's talk about receiving yards. And I am going to pat myself on the back big time here. After I take my shot of whiskey. Chris Godwin. I talked about him in the preseason. 662 yards, the most receiving yards in the NFL. 15.4 yards per reception with 6 touchdowns. Really a big part of Jameis Winston's success this year. Michael Thomas is second in yards at 632. DJ Shark is still a little under the radar. He's third in the NFL in receiving yards at 528. Go try and get DJ Shark. Just go make a crazy offer. I'm going to tell you how to do that in the upcoming weeks. DJ Shark's flying under the radar. Cooper Kupp. That's a good one, George. I probably favor Godwin just a touch over Eckler because of the Melvin Gordon factor, but that's two really good players. That's pretty even. Cooper Kupp, 522 yards, fourth in the NFL. Amari Cooper, 515. Keenan Allen, 503. Travis Kelce, 497 yards is your first non-receiver, followed directly by Austin Hooper, 480. Cortland Sutton, Julio Jones, Mike Evans, Tyler Lockett, Edelman, Fuller, Landry, Beckham, 16th, Odell Beckham. Who's not on this list, guys? Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill, DeAndre Hopkins. That's my point of this is Those guys still have name recognition, and they're still worth a lot to folks. Okay? Go capitalize on that. Go get some of these players that are in these leaderboards and sacrifice your Hopkins, your Adams. I wouldn't say to sacrifice Tyreek Hill. He's just been injured. He's fine. Let's pivot just a bit, because this is important too. This is really important to understand, guys. Team stats. Team stats. Let's talk about team leaders. Let's start with rushing, because this is really, this is what I really want you guys to understand. League leader in team rushing makes sense off of what I just told you guys. Baltimore. 205 yards a game Baltimore is rushing for. Keep this in perspective. 205 yards a game. Number 2, San Francisco. 179 yards a game. 3, Minnesota. 159 yards a game. That's it. Over 150 yards a game. That's it. San Francisco has 205, Baltimore has 205 yards. That's 55 more yards a game than elite numbers. What's my point? Target rushers off of these three teams. Go after Ravens rush. Go after Mark Ingram. Go after Tevin Coleman. Go after Dalvin Cook. Go after Alexander Madison. Knowing these stats goes a long way. I'll give you the next couple, but they're really mediocre after those three guys. Those are elite rushing teams. Indianapolis, 142. Houston, 139. Buffalo, 139. I like Buffalo in the second half. Dallas, 138. Oakland, 134. You see how they're grouped up after that? That says something. That's your league average. You think of your bell curve, right? This is your average. 130s. Baltimore's 80 points better than that, or 80 yards better than that. It's significant. Hell, even San Francisco and Minnesota are significantly better than that, right? Take that into account when you're considering a trade offer. It's great stuff, right, Ed? Don't you love it? Let's talk about passing, because I think you could kind of see the same thing here, right? Passing yards per game. Kansas City, of course, 339 yards a game. Atlanta, second, 317 yards a game. Dallas, third, 305 yards a game. That's it. That's it, guys. 3 teams are averaging 300 yards passing a game. That's it. It's nuts, right? You think in this day and age of the NFL, half the teams would be averaging 300 yards a game. 3. Kansas City's averaging 340 damn near. That's significant, right? Forget regression crap. I'm not interested in that. Mahomes is hurt. He'll be fine. He's got a high ankle sprain. Buy Pat Mahomes. Go put a crazy friggin' offer on Pat Mahomes. Again, for emphasis, let's talk about the curve. Let's talk about the rest of these jagoffs. 4, the Chargers, 288. 5, New England, 284. 6, the Rams, 272. Tampa Bay, 269. Seattle, 268. Detroit, 262. Houston, 257. So what's it look like? Again, right around 270, right? You're talking about a full, 60, 70 yards difference? That's a big deal, right? That's a big deal. Yeah, but George, that's the thing. He's banged up, but he's still throwing for 340 yards a game. Shit, what's going to happen when he's healthy? That's what I'm saying. He's going to get healthy. So, what have we learned here? I mean, I think it's important to talk about how you kind of formulate your trades now, right? How you take advantage of having this information when you go in to talk to your league mates. Because if you can get a guy who's statistically, elite, and your compatriot doesn't even know about it, right? If you can get a Mohamed Sanu as a throw-in, that makes you significantly better. If you can get a Terry McLaurin as a throw-in, so it's about knowing what you're dealing with. I hope this makes sense, because to me it's crystal clear. It's funny. We can go and we can talk some of these particulars. I don't think at this point it's. I think that's the point of the show, though, is going. So if you know these statistics, if you go in, so I'll give you the nuts right now, guys. I got 3 freaking people. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, George. Thank you, Ed. I got 3 people listening to me. So I'm going to give you the whole kit and caboodle. If you can go in and you can look, if you're going into good websites and you're getting out the right information, you can dominate your leagues just by coming up with moves that other people don't understand why you're doing it. People think way too much about what's already happened, and they don't think nearly enough about trends and where things are going, right? When you look at these stats, I'll just use one example. When you look at the team stats, I just made a trade yesterday. Team rushing stats. You see Baltimore first, you see San Francisco second, you see Minnesota third. I just went and acquired Tevin Coleman because of where San Francisco's sitting in this rushing chart. I mean, Tevin Coleman isn't very terribly highly thought of yet, right? But there's a lot of value there if he just stays healthy and in that offense. If you can go out and you can identify these players, you can really do yourself a service, right? So, I thought this was a good, after taking 4 weeks off, and in all honesty, it's been crazy, all the stuff I've been dealing with. But after taking 4 weeks off, I thought this was a great starting point to come back to. Just kind of give you guys, I always call this stuff premium content, right? Because this is the stuff that all of these prognosticators are doing, but I don't think they do a very good job of sharing how they're doing it, right? So from this, and we'll talk about this in the upcoming weeks, from what I've said, I like to, from here, get shorter stints and talk about who's hot going into these games. I like the Astros, Kevin. I think that, I'll tell you the truth. I haven't really had a chance to follow it. I just think that with the Yankees, they're in real trouble in terms of not having the pitching depth, particularly on the front end. I think Greinke's pitching tonight. I think that he shows himself this evening. But back on point, we will talk about short-term trends in the weeks upcoming. We will talk about, I love the matchup stuff that I've been talking about prior. I'm going to get back into it, but I also think it's important to kind of talk about short-term data points, because that's the only real thing, and that's how you develop these educated guesses. That's all they really are, right? So until next Thursday, thank you guys so much for being here. Lenny Melnick, FantasySports.com, Chappy's Chat, Thursday nights at 7. Please join us. Great time. Ed, George, Kevin, appreciate having you guys here tonight. Hope you enjoyed the content. If you got questions, hell, you guys know how to get a hold of me. I will personally be your fantasy savant for football from here on out. So just let me know. Again, thank you all. Have a good evening. I'll see you next Thursday. Take care.